strawberry lips shining in the summer sun. Canary tips glowing there for everyone. You fell asleep under the cherry tree. La 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 la, it's a beautiful world and we're all here. Your winter skin warming in the summer sun. We know within you will stay forever young.
Hi there. Welcome to our delightful debate discussion, a new format for how perhaps we can work out philosophical differences with one another and present you with new ideas and also get your questions. I am Adrienne Prince with Team GAIA, where we empower people to think of themselves as world-changing ninjas. And today I have in our discussion Denise Ward and Colin Turner. The title of our discussion today is Who's the Bad Guy, Money or Trade? And the topic as we have articulated it is, and I'll read that quite quickly, the Venus Project, Ubuntu, the Zeitgeist movement, and the RBE movement all take a stand against the use of money in their models of the future. They believe that sharing should replace trading. They assert that trading must not be recorded because they say this causes unbalanced prosperity and poverty. But is trade really the problem, or is it the money system itself that we are used to using? Could another money system remedy the ills that the system that as we have now causes in the world? Thank you for joining us today in a facilitated discussion between Colin Turner and Denise Ward, discussing these points. The write-up says tussling these points. I love it. So a little bit of tussling. The debate and discussion is hosted by myself, and if you stay till the end, we'll open the floor to questions. So in this special debate format, we are trying to optimize the ability for each person to really be heard, for each person to recognize the validity of others' views, and to ask insightful questions of one another to really unfold the ideas so that you, the audience, can make up your own mind and take on what works for you and perhaps even unfold new ideas. So that's the purpose of these new delightful debate discussions, and I'm so honored to have you. I'd like to introduce our speakers, or rather allow them to introduce themselves. So we have Denise Ward and Colin Turner. Denise, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello, everybody. My background is rather various. I've done many things over the years. For the last 10 years, I haven't worked, but before I left work, I worked for a property management in real estate investment trusts. I always wanted to be financially free, and in about 2004, I started learning the stock market. Rather than pay for a college in finance, I decided to learn through doing my own investments. And so I invested small amounts so that I could learn. I also studied a lot, usually on the weekends, because I kept my job, my secure job at the REIT. I studied at the library company financials of companies that I want to invest in. You know, I had to look around for those companies, so I had to find out what their financials were. I followed the Warren Buffett investment method very closely, and I read all the books, kept up with all the latest and greatest, always read the financial papers and watched Bloomberg all the time. So I continued to work, but I could see in about 2007 that things were not quite right. Valuations were ridiculously valued and nothing made any sense. And I would look at Bloomberg and television, and I would look at the announcers and the financial experts, and I think, but they're not saying anything about this. And you know, I couldn't believe that they were acting as though everything was normal. I became quite disillusioned, and it looked like sort of more like a casino than anything else. In those days, I knew about the 9/11 hoax, but I didn't know about the birth certificate fraud and even deeper financial things. My work allowed me to indulge my passion of green buildings and renewable energies, and I attended as many conferences and seminars and workshops as I could. At one of the workshops, I met a couple who were extolling the virtues of hemp, and I couldn't believe that that people didn't know about hemp. I didn't know about hemp and all the things that it could do. You could make paper, buildings, replace fossil fuels, and nobody was talking about this. I got sick of sitting in an office every day, and I felt that I had to get out there and tell people about what's going on when I started to find out. And I couldn't sit in the office every day. I was very frustrated. And then my friend who became my friend, the woman who was doing the workshop on hemp, asked me if I would be her campaign manager as she was going to run for governor for Vermont. And I on the platform of hemp and public banking. So I was both enthused about both of them, but it required me leaving my job, and I had a very secure job. And so I thought about it for about a month, and then I decided to take her up on it. We had a great adventure, and she didn't win the election, but we managed to talk to people so much throughout Vermont and in Washington, D.C., that hemp became legal only 2 years later. We put out a big ad in a newspaper in Vermont, a few newspapers in Vermont, which attracted the attention of the Attorney General and the government, because we said that it goes against the rules of NAFTA by prohibiting hemp for the United States, residents. And so they were concerned about
Denise?
that. Yeah.
I would love to know a little bit more about your work. Could you tell us about the Mamalution? Just tell us that you are with Mamalution, and then it's Colin's turn to introduce himself.
Sure. So now I'm just really writing as much as I can to what I call wake people up to these things that we're not paying attention to. And Frederick and I started the Mamalution Dialogues about over a year ago, and we have them every week, which allows activists or anybody else, they're fully open free speech platforms where anybody can say anything. There's no moderation, like you're moderating this talk today, Adrienne, but we don't moderate at all. And so we try to work out it's through our own, sense of what should be said and not said, or whatever, ourselves. And we decide, and this is where we practice rather free speech, because we really have nowhere. There's always somebody telling us what we should and shouldn't say.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful introduction. I loved hearing that story. Colin, would you like to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Adrienne and Denise. Thanks a million for hosting this, Adrienne. It's really much appreciated. So my name is Colin Turner. I'm an Irish author. I suppose from a recent historical perspective, like many people, I began to ask questions of the status quo around the time of the financial crash in 2007, 2008. And at that time, I had just sold a company that I owned, and so I was kind of in a sort of doubly fortunate position that I was actually able to sell my company before the bottom fell out of the global market, and B, that I was able to I had some money basically to take time out from life, as we say, and to do a bit of catching up on what was really going on in the world, I suppose, like many other people. So I had spare money and I had free time, and all this stuff was going on in the world, and there was lots of, and of course the rise of social media and the internet was really catching fire at that time. And so, yeah, there was a real wealth of new information coming out there, alt media stuff coming out, which was really good. And the first thing I happened on was a film called Zeitgeist by a chap called Peter Joseph. who later went on to join up with the Venus Project, who were promoting a resource-based economy. And so I sort of fell into that world of conspiracy theory, I suppose, for want of another word, and alternate thinking. And part of that, of course, was that that the monetary system and the banking system were pretty much fraudulent, and that also there were other possibilities out there beyond just trading and buying and selling things all the time. So yeah, really, it was quite an interesting couple of years for me. Pretty much my mind was blown by this idea of, hey, maybe we don't need money. You know, that was a shocker for me. I had never thought of that before. So yeah, that led me into. I wanted to get involved in that movement because it interested me so much. It resonated so much with me. So I wrote something called the Free World Charter, which was an attempt to sort of define 10 guiding principles for that kind of money-free world. And I've since gone on to written a couple of books on the topic, and we've constructed a wiki on this topic called Open Access. And the latest project, and one that I'm most excited about, is a project called ShareBay, which is like an eBay for people sharing and giving goods and services freely across the world. So that's something that I'm working on probably now mostly. And yeah, so that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. That was really inspiring and interesting. So what we're going to do now is that each speaker is going to state their premise and where they are on this question of who's the bad guy, money or trade, and how they see society moving forward in the future, or anything that they want. What we're going to do to keep the discussion moving along and also collaborative is each will speak in a 3-minute section. In the first round, they will lay out their basic ideas. And in the second round, they will respond to the idea that they heard before. And we're always looking for, unfolding new opportunities and really understanding the potential of the viewpoint that you hold. In round 3, each person will get the opportunity to ask the other a question, and then they will answer. And so the speaker time will actually be taken by the person answering the question, but the person whose turn it is the asker. After that, we may do a 4th quick round to do a summary if there's interest in that. And then we'll open the floor to question and answer. Does that sound okay? Does everyone understand how we're proceeding? Okay, wonderful. I'm going to switch now, I think, to speaker view, though. Actually, this is working out very well. I think maybe we'll stay here in gallery since we have a nice small group today. All right, so Denise is the person who won the coin toss. She's going first. Denise, where do you stand on this issue, and why do you think that it's important? And we're beginning the time now.
Right, I am on the side of trade is a normal thing, and money is the bad guy, but not necessarily money, but the money that we have, that we use, the way we use the money. There's numerous different systems that money could be worked under, but we use this ridiculous system where only the bankers issue the money, and they issue it with a deficiency, meaning that every dollar that's issued, $4 or more is owed. So basically you have to buy money and pay a premium for it. And so we're never going to get to we're always going to be digging a hole for ourselves, so to speak. We're always creating deficiency. And this is against nature, because nature is abundant. And I feel that these organizations that we have talked about, the Zeitgeist movement, etc., they're really spinning on the spot. And then because they believe that trade is the problem. And trade is not a problem, because if I need something, if I need my plumbing done, if I can't trade it with if I can't convince somebody to do it for me because it's something I can't do, we're interdependent, then I won't be able to get plumbing done. But if you don't have a way of recording the time that people spend doing the work for you, then you're not going to be able to have anything done. We're seeing this now. Actually, we're not being able to get any work done that we need because, well, we don't have the money. And so it's the money that's the problem, not trade. And I'm very concerned that there's a lot of activist time going into this, where they could be putting their energy and their intelligence on understanding what the real problem is, working out a bridge to get to a no money world. I don't believe that we can get to a no money world in one fell swoop. I think we need a bridge to that. And we can even say when we will stop using the money. We can predict when we're going to stop using it. We might say for the next 5 years, we're going to use a new money system and it's going to work like this. And then we're going to review it after 5 years with the intention of getting rid of money completely in another 5 years. Because we've got to create the infrastructure of a no money world before you can not use money. And I'm a perfect example of that because I have eschewed money. And so it's very difficult living in the world without money. You have to do a lot of other convolutions. And if we were all on the same page, we would absolutely soar, I'm sure.
Thank you. That was beautifully said. It was really fun to follow along with this. I'm really happy with our format. It's fun to watch you unfold your ideas, you guys. All right, Colin, you're up next.
Thanks, Adrienne, and thanks, Denise. Yes. Okay, so I think the best way to describe the direction that I'm coming from is obviously I'm proposing a post-trade world. But the best way to describe the direction I'm coming from is possibly if you take Denise's position of the way we do money and the way we do things are bad. But my proposition is that the actual money system and the banking system that is all basically predicated on the trade system. Now I'll explain a little bit more about this later, hopefully in detail. But I think the best way to describe it is whereas Denise is maybe saying that money is the bad thing, I'm going back a little bit further, more to what I consider to be the root cause of where money comes from, rather than saying that money itself is just the problem. I'm saying that if we want to solve the problems of money, well, then we have to solve the problems of, well, why is money, and what do we use that for, and how does that work? Also, I think it's really important to define what I describe as a post-trade world, or an open access economy is the expression I usually use. But it's really important to define this mostly as a mindset change. It's a different way of people operating on a most fundamental level. It's not like, swapping dollars for Bitcoin or, changing the ownership of banks or getting rid of, the democratic process or anything like that. It's all about how we as individuals operate, what our expectations of life are, how they are at the moment, and why those expectations are actually at odds with the best outcome for everybody. So currently, if you have a trade system, then you are promoting self-interest by default. It means that society is a competition of sorts, and it's in your own interest to amass as much wealth as you can to secure your future and your family's future. So you can't avoid that problem with money or without. You can't avoid the fact that trade requires, or it incentivizes self-maximization. So if I have to trade my goods and services in order to receive goods and services, then if there is a way for me to gamify that process where I can actually secure wealth for myself so I don't have to work as hard in the future, then of course I'm going to do that. And that's what people do with money. They just use money to express the same thing. Whereas if you have an opportunity to make lots of money, to make your life easier in the future, then you would do that.
Time, thank you. So Denise, I know that you had a question for Colin. If you want to ask it in this second round, you're welcome to, or you can go ahead into your response, whichever you prefer.
I'd like to respond while it's fresh. Well, I agree with you, Colin. Money is artificial, and the way we are using money is completely wrong. If we had another money system, there wouldn't be a problem, because really money is just a measure of time put that somebody is doing something for me. So if I want somebody to do something for me, I should give them something back, rather than if somebody does something for me, they get nothing back, just like somebody who does nothing for me. So that we must have a distinction between people who work and people who do nothing, because this is what the no money world has done. And for example, I've worked with Ubuntu, and that's what happens. People tend to just do as little as they can. Whereas if it's being recorded, money is just a measure of the time somebody has spent working for me, and I give them back a response that says, I acknowledge you have given me this many hours of your life. So I think that if money was done properly, and it can be done properly, at the moment, how it's done is it's a buying and selling. It's a commodity. It must never be a commodity. It's like inches. You don't buy and sell inches. They're just a measure. So if the money was done differently, Colin, would you consider looking at something like that and experimenting with something like that? Perhaps with ShareBay.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about alternative currencies, and of course, Bitcoin is one that's really quite popular at the moment. There have been many examples of alternative currencies that have popped up in local areas, but typically they have fizzled out. They haven't managed to secure the sort of popularity required to be to become a de facto currency. And even Bitcoin, and with all its popularity, is basically not adopted anywhere. So there is that problem first and foremost with alternative currencies, that they can't possibly compete with de facto currency because of the simple fact that it's one is ubiquitous and the other isn't. But the second problem with alternative currencies, or what you're talking about, is simply the same thing as what I mentioned earlier, is that as long as you gamify society in some way, then you will always have people who game it to their advantage. So, for example, if you're saying that, if you're giving an hour of your time or some effort to somebody, you expect them to reciprocate. Well, if there's a way for you or the other person to actually gain advantage in that trading relationship, then you should always expect that person to do that. And that's really why we see the problems with money in the world that we see today. What that really is, it's just a massive extension of self-interest and maximization of individuals. And it manifests itself now in, giant corporations and billionaires and massive inequality. So my major argument, Adrienne.
So we're going to roll into your time now. So
Okay.
At some point, okay, go ahead. You said my major argument.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, my major argument hinges on the idea, first and foremost, that a post-trade world is not something that you can just map onto society as we know it today. The society as we know it today cannot exist anymore. It needs to die. That methodology that we have been using needs to die, basically, because it absolutely promulgates self-interest maximization all the time. Every single example that you can think of in any country, society, at any point in history has always produced the same result, that you have a hierarchical system, you have a pyramid structure, you have people with lots, and you have people with very little. There is not one example that you can realistically provide in history or in current times where people are trading and it's an egalitarian and it's an equal system. I mean, I should also add that part of the problem is that if somebody is particularly good at something, they have like an extraordinary skill, then that person gets richly rewarded today. Like if I create some amazing innovation, then I'll get hugely rewarded for that. And that's not always a good idea either. You know, it's like the reward is disproportional. So as one person is creating something amazing that other people are enjoying, they're also sucking up wealth, which is unnecessary. And it's breeding this idea that we all must self-maximize. So even if I create something that's really good for the public good and I make lots of money from doing that, I'm setting the precedent for people who maybe are not doing such anything as noble maybe as I am, and they're still sucking up money from it. So the point is that it's a magnetic system. You know, it's like a black hole that people, once they start to self-maximize, it's very hard to stop. And most people, given the opportunity, don't stop. They'll keep going and building their position. And that happens as a result of trade and gamifying society.
Thank you. You're right on time. I appreciate that. I really enjoyed that round that we just did. I hope that worked for you too, that both are able to complete their thoughts. We're now entering round 3, where Denise, as you have asked a question, has that been your only question?
I guess I've got a lot
or
of
would you
questions,
like
but
to speak? You may use this round to just speak to this. Would that be
to
all
what
right?
Colin said. I think that, Colin, you've used a wrong premise. I shouldn't say a wrong premise, but a premise that because it hasn't happened in the past, it can't happen in the future. Well, and also all the basis that you mentioned, our behavior coming from, is because of the money system. If we didn't have this money system, Bitcoin is still buying and selling of money. You must not buy and sell inches. It's just a measurement. We've got to just use money as a measurement. And we don't have to just have one organization issuing the money like it is right now, either the Bitcoin people or the banker people or whoever issues the money. We can issue the money ourselves. Well, that's one way. There's many other ways that we can have money. There's many other methods of using money. And what I'm suggesting is that we use money for a proper money system that we agree to. Only the people that agree. It's not going to be ubiquitous, like you say, the banker's money system is. It's not going to be like that, because it will start in small pockets, like ShareBay might start using it, and then some other free cycling area group might use it, and then another group, and that's an organic way, and that is what is sustainable. The way we do everything is so artificial because it brings money in. Now, an artificial kind of money, all money is artificial, that's true, and it is a game, but we need to play the game, a new game, because people are so motivated by this game. We've got to take that into consideration. Otherwise, we are not going to get anywhere. Now, I'd love to see ShareBay really fly, but the thing is, if there isn't a method of determining who are the people who do the work and who are the people who don't do the work, then it's just going to sit and in limbo. So if we had a measuring system, then we could see the people, oh, this person really fulfills, or at least a rating system or some system. We need some system. You can call it money, you could call it a rating system, you can call it what you like, but we need some system to be able to determine how to go ahead, because otherwise everybody just looks the same. And so there's no incentive, there's no motivation to do anything. It's just like not paying volunteers any respect. Their work just doesn't even go into the record. So I believe that if we just tried another money system and experimented, I think we would find it very beneficial.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. So we are going to move on over to Colin, and then we can discuss if we want to do an extra round. This is also interesting to me.
Thanks, Denise. That's great. Yeah, I agree with agree with some of your points there, most notably about the rating system. And I just want to say that one of the things that happens on ShareBay is that there is rating and reputation is actually included in there. So I agree with you that at the bare minimum, we certainly need to have reputation. And I sometimes get into trouble with people by saying that, well, you can't measure reputation, but I think that reputation is always going to be a part of society. I think we can never get rid of that. Even if we, get rid of money, get rid of all ratings, get all things, people will still talk. That's just the way we operate. We have opinions about other people. So if somebody does us a bad turn once or twice in a row, well, we're probably not going to deal with that person again. And maybe we might say negative things about that person. So reputation, absolutely. I agree 100%. You can't have a non-money system that's just completely like random noise. But I would say that I have to stress again that when I'm talking about a post-trade system, it's nothing like what we do today. It's not when you're describing like you have a problem with your plumbing and you want to get somebody to come and fix your plumbing, and you have to trade to do that. Well, we have to think differently about that, and we have to try and envision a world where, rather than you look up the yellow pages of the internet and you ring a plumber and they come and you pay them money, that rather than that there are people on hand that about, that there is like a local network, and you have your pick of plumbers and you just pick whoever is available. And of course, when they're helping you, it's obviously inferred that you are helping your community as well, and that's reflected in the rating and the reputation system. And I suppose controversially, maybe in ShareBay, we do kind of encourage people to think about the reputation and the person and the rating of the person that you're dealing with, for your own protection, really, I suppose. It's not something we've really totally figured out yet, but I suppose if somebody is asking if two people are requesting a service or a good from you, then it should be, it's obviously your decision, but we would expect most people to actually choose the candidate with the higher reputation, the person who's given the most. So for example, on ShareBay, you have every time in the new version, which isn't released yet, but every time your name appears, there is like a number showing how many times you've contributed to the community. So that's kind of a measure of work, I suppose, to a degree.
Beautiful. Thank you guys for both being so disciplined with your time. This is wonderful. All right, we are entering, I believe, round 3. You may each do whatever you like with your time. Denise, you go ahead.
Well, I guess I'll sort of conclude, I think, but I don't know if that's ready for that, but I'll just answer to Colin's. For a start, I would like to know how you measure the contribute to the society. I would like to express that this is hard. This is hard because we really have to create a picture of what hasn't happened yet, and we're really looking into a future that hasn't happened yet. So it gets a little bit elusive to explain, but I do believe that we can move forward because we're evolving all the time. Now, Colin, what you're depending on, I feel, is the virtue of people, and I think that if you just depend on the virtue of people without a proper system, you're going to leave the door open for what I call the tapeworms. So you then the people who want to take advantage of other people, and I see this happen all the time in these movements that we were talking about. We've got to create a system that if you go out of the system, that attracts attention. So that it's a virtue-based system, really. And then if you're not doing something virtuous, you stick out like a sore thumb. And so the system that I'm well, there's many different money systems. One could be done on reputation, Colin, as well. We could be issuing money, but people might want to deal in our currency because they know that they can trust us. Whereas another person's currency, they can't be trusted to show up or to do the work properly, and what fulfilling your obligations that you say to others, fulfilling your agreements becomes your currency. And everything, people want to deal with you because they know you're going to do, and that becomes a currency, and other people want to start using your currency for their dealings as well, and it starts to become a sort of a network of trustworthy people. And so the way we've been taught to think is that one currency has to be ubiquitous, as you said. Well, it doesn't have to be like that. There's nearly 8 billion people on the earth. We can be using different currencies, and we can be doing things in a different way instead of this complete dependence on the issued currency by the bankers.
Thank you. Wonderful. Colin?
Mm-hmm. It's quite a lot to unpack there. Just on your comment about the currency from the bankers, I just want to repeat what I said earlier, and that was that I believe that the money system, the financial system, the banking system, everything that most people or activists who believe to be bad about society, that these are logical extensions of trade. I mean, there's no way of avoiding that. This is what I said earlier, that as long as you gamify society, then you will people who will gain that to their advantage. Now, you've also mentioned about people who take advantage in a virtuous society, and I want to address that because it's really quite important that even though, yes, you're right, what I'm really proposing is a very virtuous society, but as I'm repeating, it's not the kind of society that can map onto what we know today, because today is very much gamified and people are out to seek advantage. People will behave badly and will take advantage of people who behave well. That happens today. But what we have to do, regardless of money or no money, what we have to do is we have to re-educate ourselves, our society, our children towards more compassionate, more cooperative values. And we don't have that value system in our education system today, which is an absolute crime against humanity as far as I'm concerned, that we teach young children literally just to become careerists, to become very specialists, to excel at exams and grades. And so we're teaching competition and specialism from day one. And that is obviously creating a competing and specialist society, which is the problem that we have. And then, so we shouldn't be surprised when these kids are growing up and they're taking advantage of other kids, and we all know, we've all know stories of people who are taken advantage of. I've been taken advantage of. I've probably taken advantage of people as well in my time. But this thing happens in society, and we have to create a society that is more virtuous and that is more compassionate. We must do that anyway. Even if we keep money, even if we don't do any of this, what we're talking about, we must become more compassionate. We must become more cooperative, because we are all in this planet together. We have to operate together to a much greater extent than we do today. Because literally our lives depend on it. The future of our species depends on it. The future of countless other species depend on our being more compassionate, more collaborative. So this is why I'm really at pains to point out that we must change the map of society irrevocably. It cannot work this way. And this way is based on the competition, the trading idea. Now, maybe if you want to talk about, sorry, I know I'm over time, Adrienne.
Yes, Denise will have a turn too then. Go right ahead, Colin, you're riffing.
I mean, what I've heard suggested from some activists, and maybe this is, well, actually, there's a couple of things that maybe you might be interested in, and I'm open to other ideas. But one of them has been suggested is like the currency of an hour. I think maybe you might have suggested that yourself, Denise, that we trade our hours because everyone's time is the same. So if I do something for you, then that's costing me 1 hour, and then somebody owes me an hour or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like it's a constant currency, because no one can argue with the value of an hour. So it's the same. That's one possibility. Maybe that can work. Another one that is quite interesting is this thing called copiosis, which a friend of mine, Perry, is working on, which is people only get paid when they do something that's conducive to society, to promoting the social good. That's another interesting idea. The idea of that is that all the basics of life are provided for free anyway. But if you provide something of high value and beneficial to society, then you will get paid in the currency for that. But those are two interesting ideas. But I always think I always come back to the point that as long as you turn it into a game, then you're going to have winners and losers. And maybe we just need to ask ourselves, are we happy with that? Are we happy with that state of affairs where we have winners and losers? Apart from the collateral damage to the environment and to other species, of course, which is mostly disregarded by most economists. But are we happy to have a society of winners and losers, or can we do better? I think we can do better. And I think we need to do better.
Beautiful. Thank you. So Denise, we'll consider this to be the round of the conclusion. And so Colin has done what I would consider to be a pretty neat conclusion. Would you like to wrap up? And then we'll open up the floor to Q&A.
Yep. Thank you. Well, first of all, Colin, I think who decides what is conducive to society? That you're leaving it too open to. We can't have people making decisions like that again, because that's another problem of today. We're in a sea of authority, belief in authority, and we can't have that. And also, it's sort of like telling people you can build a house, but you can't use any tools. You're not supposed to trade. You got to build a society, a wonderful society, but you're not allowed to have any tools. And that's all money. Well, how we think of money is it's exploitation, but money is really just an exchange system. It's just a logging system. Really, that's all it should be. It's just a measurement system. We're left still sort of ill-equipped to be able to deal with everyday things. I believe that we need a system. We should agree on a system. It should be a system that we decide it will go for 10 years or whatever we agree to, but it's just an example of the details which can change, because we have to have, first of all, a consensus system and get off authority. That's another debate. But everything that we've seen and done is motivated by money. Everything, the education system, where people move to, the jobs people take, the life people have to choose from, and it's all based on their ability to have money, or the amount of money that they've got in this toxic system. So we've never really seen anything that's been healthy, but there have been healthy things, but because we've got an army and police force, they have wiped them out. So we've got a lot of work to do to educate each other, and we can't wait for the younger generation. We've got to show the younger generation by what we do, because we can't wait for another generation. We're going to cause there's going to be no freedom if we do that. So I think that I would love to see to convince you and to convince others that we need a system, and what we need to do is get together and start figuring out what kind of a system. And it doesn't have to just be one. We should start experimenting more, because it's gotten nowhere. Ubuntu, one small town, Zeitgeist, the Venus Project. I don't know anybody who's experienced life that way. So in the 20 years that they've been going, what they're talking about, they need to have an upgrade, and themselves. They need to look at themselves, that they haven't been successful.
Thank you. This concludes the formal part of the debate. Now we'll open up the floor to Q&A. And if everybody's familiar with the reactions button, that's probably the very best way. I know we've only got 4 other participants today, but if you want to raise your hand using the reaction button, like so, then that would probably be helpful. Okay, so Patricia has her hand up. And I think what we'll do, Patricia, anyone with a question can say, it's for both of you, it's for one of you, and then specify. Go ahead, Patricia. First, we ask to unmute. You'll need to unmute.
I think I have some comments I'd like to share rather than question. Is that acceptable or?
How do you guys feel?
Okay. Okay. What I'm seeing, what I'm gathering here is that both Denise and Colin have the same desire for the same outcome, which is a society of human beings who are living at peace in their environment and with each other in an egalitarian way. And I think that what Denise is sharing is a sort of a stepping stone toward the thing that Colin is jumping to. That and when Colin talks about a pyramid, this is everything that I talk about today is going from the pyramid to the circle. And the pyramid is the hierarchy which was brought in around 6,000 years ago. And as far as I know with my research, prior to 6,000 years ago, there were societies of human beings flourishing that had the formation of discussion and agreement and decision making was a circle, which meant that every single person, including the children and the oldest people, had an equal say. So that's total consensus. And that I think that is the perfect system to live on this planet. And Earth herself is the one who actually was, who gave the instructions to those original societies about how to live with and on this Earth. And that was abandoned around 6,000 years ago. I mean, there's all kinds of philosophical arguments about how that happened and where it came from. But the reality is that it was a violent overthrow. And we've experienced it here on the west coast of Canada, British Columbia, only for about 250 years. It's just not that old. Even 150 years in some areas, where people did enjoy an economic system based on giving rather than taking. Because like Denise was saying, nature is abundant. Nature is abundant. One apple seed produces how many thousands of, one sockeye salmon, thousands of eggs. It's a natural thing that abundance is the reality. Okay, sorry. So there's a lot to it, and there were checks and balances in these societies that still exist in some, like the potlatch. And the point of them is to continue with a balance instead of an imbalance and a hierarchy. So there are examples of societies who have lived in this ideal economy. It's just a question of how do we get from here to there.
Thank you so much, Patricia. That was beautiful. Now I have a question. We have somebody else with a question / comment. Shall we both speak to this new direction that's unfolding, or shall we take a question?
I'd like to answer that, if that's okay.
Sounds good. I'm going to keep putting you guys on the clock, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, I'll be quick. Yeah, Patricia, that was really insightful and useful. Thanks very much for that. I just wanted to say, well, there's a few things I wanted to say, but mostly what I wanted to say is, yes, there are evidence of highly egalitarian circular societies from 10,000 years ago plus. And the reason I think for that is, and this kind of speaks to really I think what myself and Denise really agree on, perhaps mostly, what this is about is in those days, obviously much less people on the planet, so there was much less competition for resources. Okay, well, I mean, well, at least apparent competition. And of course, societies were much less complex than they are. We didn't have cities with millions of people. So what we had really, what the evidence has shown was that we had like small tribes which were very familial in nature, and a lot of the people in those tribes were related. They were, they were cousins, they were grandfathers, grandchildren, etc. And so it really was an expanded family network. And occasionally they would, other people would come and go from those tribes. But by and large, the reason that those things were kind of circular and they were successful, I think, was because there was a very strong common sense of purpose and of fortune together. That we were, we were like this bunch of 30, 40 people in a hostile world, and we all had to look out for each other. So, before you don't want to get eaten by a tiger or a bear, or you don't want to go hungry. So it was vitally important that people operated together, and it created this sort of familial bond between people. And I think that that's probably fundamentally what we're missing most in modern society. Now, you can say that's because of money, or you can say it's just because there's so many people and society is much more complex. But until we arrive at the realization that we are all in it together, regardless of whether we like each other or not, but we are one family on Earth together, and what we're currently doing makes a big difference on the planet, and we have to be careful about that. So that's, I think, that familial structure is really what I think is missing most, that we don't have a shared sense of fortune or responsibility towards the planet or each other. We're all kind of isolated, heavily individualized. We're just making money, doing our little jobs, working in our little corner, but we don't have the realization of the bigger picture that we are all in together. So that's just one thing I'd like to say on that.
Great. Denise, would you like to speak to this, or shall we move forward?
I'm fine with it. I'm familiar with Pat's ideas, but I think Pat was shaking her head when Colin said that they didn't have the population that we've got now, and I'm wondering what Pat said. I don't know if we could.
Well, for instance, the Six Nations of the Iroquois Mohawk people is 6 million people all getting along. So I don't think it's a question of numbers. I think it's a question of relationship, not only with each other, but with the earth and animals, trees, plants, water, fish. If humans continue to see ourselves as superior, there's no hope. There's absolutely no hope. So the whole attitude toward life has to be completely turned upside down, where we realize that humans are the weakest, the most pathetic, the most pitiful, and the neediest, not superior at all. So.
Awesome observation. Okay, we're going to move ahead to Clifford May. He has a question he would like to share.
Yes. So I was thinking on a somewhat expanded scale in terms of society level. I mean, we have governments that have to collect taxes.
Cliff,
Yes.
I need to stop you. I'm not sure that we can hear you well. Your voice is very soft. Is there a way to get closer to the mic or turn on your camera or both?
I'll try getting closer to the camera. Is this working?
This is
now?
much better. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay.
And could you start from the beginning?
Sure, yeah. So thinking at a different scale, I mean, we have governments that collect taxes and such like that, and I'm not sure how government level services would be provided under the banking reform or the trading reform concepts, or if they're intended to go to that, to scale up in that way. and also at a sort of societal level, talking about unfairnesses and inequalities. There's the idea, well, the fact that many groups have been discriminated against historically and given a lot of economic disadvantages, educational disadvantages, not allowed to participate in government, not even kept from voting, all those kinds of things. And so reparations comes into discussions about how to sort of prevent discrimination and prejudice and create a more level playing field, if you will, for personal growth. So I was just wondering if y'all have comments about whether these systems or reforms would scale to address those level issues.
Awesome. I'll give Denise the first opportunity to reply.
Great.
All right, thanks.
Clifford, I feel that government is a completely artificial construct. All of it, everything is an artificial construct, but we've got to understand that because it's just a construct, we don't have to go by it. It's just something that we all have unwittingly and unconsciously gone by. Now, we can have consensus without government. We can have you, me, Colin, Pat, Adrienne, everybody having a say. We've got the internet now. We can have an exact consensus, and we can even see who believes and agrees with which way it should go. We can make proposals ourselves. We don't need these mummies and daddies to make the proposals for us and to vote on proposals that other people, mummies and daddies, make. We're grown up now, and we don't need government to determine what is fair. It's totally artificial and totally skewed. So when you speak about government, in my ears, I feel as though we've got to get out of that mentality of government and recognize that it is illegitimate, because it is really like a few people who agree with it now. There's really not many people. If you worked out the amount of people who vote, it's a very small percentage now. I think it's long ago there was 40% who wanted a third party or who voted for a third party, but I think there's a lot of disillusionment now with this system, and that's okay. But with the people that we don't have to have everybody, but we need to have some people starting it, because the currency was nothing at the beginning. It only started by a few people, and then it gained momentum. The government was the same thing. It's just ideas that gain momentum. And so now we have to have new ideas, and hopefully they will gain momentum if we can be convincing enough. What we need to be is good communicators so that we can be convincing enough, and then we don't need weapons to do that. So I'm sorry, but everything government is distorted. That's basically that's why it doesn't make sense. That's why nothing makes sense.
Thank you. Colin?
Yep. Yes, I think that government, and you mentioned tax as well. I think tax is an interesting thing, because in a money world, you have to have tax, which kind of tells you in a way that money doesn't work, because it's kind of saying, well, look, you earn a certain amount of money, but you have to give a certain amount back because we need this money to operate society. And that's basically true. Most of the tax goes towards improving society and the infrastructure and stuff like that. But there are lots of indicators in the money system, like tax, like debt, like a welfare system, which all basically tell us that money isn't working. It doesn't work, that it's ineffective. Because when you think about it, if a trading system worked, if it really worked, if that was the best way to operate society, then you wouldn't need tax, you wouldn't need debt, you wouldn't need a welfare system. You wouldn't need charities. None of these things would exist. They only exist because the money system is ineffective. It doesn't work. There's no other reason for that. The government is also interesting, because one of the other problems one of the bigger problems, well, not bigger problems, but one of the other significant problems in society is our personal abdication of responsibility. And I'm not talking about anyone here in this room, I'm talking about generally in the population. I see this a lot, that most people, they're just too busy in their own lives. They don't really care about government policy, blah, 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 one way or another. Or maybe some people have opinions, but I'm talking about most people. They just want to get on with their lives. They're busy working, they're paying for a house, they have children, they're paying for their second or third car or whatever in the holidays. Most people, they don't really care much about how society is run. And I think that's awful for a start, okay? But I think that government is almost like this paid institution that we employ to solve all our shit for us. And that's really what it does. And politicians are there for us to just dump our problems on them when they become overwhelming because we don't know what else to do. And this is exactly what's happening in the climate crisis. That's the climate emergency that's happening, is that everyone is looking to government to say, well, do something about this. But actually the problem is the way we are consuming. That's creating the problem. The government aren't creating the problem. They're really bystanders in that. So a lot of these things, the tax and government, are all indicators that society as we know it is ineffective at solving its own problems. And again, and most importantly, it's taking our sense of personal responsibility and sovereignty. I know this is something that's close to your heart, Denise, is being taken from us by us surrendering our responsibility and just outsourcing all our problems for someone else to fix. We have to stop that. We have to take responsibility for our lives, for the things that happen to us, and for the things that happen to other people and to other species on the planet. We don't take responsibility. So
I want to thank everybody for participating. It's been a wonderful experience. Now, since we've had I'm trying to think of how to go with this, since you're going to each be editing your own videos. This would be your opportunity to let people know how they can find out more about you. And after that moment, then we could just open up the floor to a free form discussion, perhaps completely unmoderated. Maybe Denise will be the unmoderator. And then we can go for like another 20 minutes. That way, if everybody's here and they're having a good time, great. If you found some video that you can use on your websites, great. We've got the footage. And then we can just have like a free form experience. So first, Denise, please let us know how we can learn more about what you're working on.
I'm working on the Mammolution dialogues, and also I have written the architecture for the new epoch. And I believe that we can start by systems. Systems can be our salvation, because we are, when there's a lot of people and we're not all family connected anymore, we need systems, but we need good systems. And one of the systems I'm suggesting is that we reclaim the calendar and use a proper, sensible cyclical calendar instead of the 12-month calendar that the Roman Empire has inflicted upon us. And that's the first stance that we could take for claiming our sovereignty. If you want to find out anything about it, I have Serendipity Media is my media collaborative that you can find me on YouTube and World Truth videos. I did have a lot of work on Facebook. I've been locked out. A lot of my work over the years has been on Facebook, but I can't access it, but you still can. And I have files there. If you go to the files, it's not updated because I can't get in there to update. I'm also on medium.com. I write on medium.com, and I comment in a lot of places online. But Serendipity Media is the media collaborative that I use. The Mammolution dialogues are uploaded on Serendipity Media YouTube channel and also World Truth TV. Not all of them on YouTube because they censor, so most of them are on World Truth TV.
Great. Thanks for that, Denise. Yeah, I've worked on a few online projects. The Free World Charter was the one that I started with. That's still there. The one I work at mainly now is ShareBay, which you can find at sharebay.org, and that's the global goods and services sharing network. And that's of all the things that I really have talked about and talk about over the years, that to me is like the culmination of the experiment. So I'm very much of the opinion these days that there's too much talk on this kind of level and not enough action from people. And I'm very much trying to encourage people to take action, even on a small level, that can help sort of bring in this kind of world that we want to see. And certainly sharing goods and services is never a bad thing in any no matter your ideology. It's always a good thing. At the very least, it's saving use of resources and encouraging collaboration between people. Whether ShareBay or sharing in general can actually create this wonderful sharing and virtuous world that I envision, who knows? But I think we should certainly try, and that seems to be a valid avenue to that kind of world anyway. So that's what I'm interested in. I also wrote a couple of books. I wrote a novel, which was like a countdown to this type of world. It's called F-Day. And I wrote another book shortly after called Into the Open Economy, which is like a basic synopsis of the idea and how it would work and what it would look like. But as I say, sharebay.org is the main space for me now, and I'd love to see some people on there. And you can look me up there and get in touch. If you have any ideas for the site, I'd certainly love to hear it. So we're actually doing a new version of that coming out in the next week or so. So that's really exciting. But yeah, other than that, yeah, I'm just happy to be here, and really enjoyed the discussion with Denise and with yourself, Adrienne, and it's nice to meet wonderful people who I'm sure we are what we agree on intersect much more than what we disagree on. Of course, we're all pretty much on the same page that we have to do better. We got to do better than this. Maybe it's this way, maybe it's that way, but certainly I think we're on the right direction. I'm also actually just to conclude, I'm also quite optimistic about society and about the world in general, which I think is quite rare. I believe that we are on a good path. I think that we're starting to break up with old ways. I think that's already happening. Certainly in some countries, they're adopting this thing called a well-being economy. That's one thing I find very encouraging. Which is like they're trying to move away from GDP and towards human well-being, and having a metric for that. And I think that's really promising, because that's showing an intention to kind of move in a different direction. So even though things are not as we would like them, I do believe that we are on the road towards that. So I'm quite optimistic about that. Lots of good things going on.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. This concludes the debate.
It's a beautiful world.
It's a beautiful world.
It's a beautiful